Hi, folks. You're with Tastus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. Now, in this chat, I'd like to talk about the mainstream media and traditional media. So we're talking print media, television, and the more, the earlier incarnations of cable television, or most of it. So just doing an examination, I've spent a bit of time on this. Around 85 to 90% of all the mainstream media, be it print or otherwise, all across the Western world, is not commercially viable. They're losing money. If it was a business, they'd be bankrupt and would go out of business. So they're not there to be run as businesses as it was once the case. Now, if you look at going back some years now, and this is really before the advent of the internet, there were many viable news stations and the city newspapers and so on that were doing very well. Now, the internet changed that. It fractured a lot of things and changed the market dynamics and splintered off news and various other things into vertical little sort of marketplaces where people could pursue particular or specific interests or pursue views and attitudes that they particularly liked and so on. Whereas the newspaper or the mainstream media channels, TV channels, by definition, had to have a broader focus if they were going to bring the viewers in and thus get the advertising dollars. So anyway, that model of eyeballs to advertising, dollars to viability, that's been disrupted by the internet or changed, disrupted and changed. And but nonetheless, the mainstream media has gone on largely as before. So the big newspapers around, some have gone, or quite a few have gone, but some of the big mastheads are still around. The Los Angeles Times, New York Times, and so on. The Jeff Bezos has bought a newspaper in Washington. So there are still some mastheads around, but none of them are viable. None of them make any money. None of them get the advertising dollars in, and none of them are reaching the required number of eyeballs in order to justify their commercial existence. So what are they doing exactly? What's their purpose? If it's not commercial and economic, then financial, then why do they exist? Well, it's as simple as this. The globalists have in fact bought out and own pretty much the entire mainstream media, be it print media, be it television, be it free-to-air television or cable television, or be it a lot of the social media such as YouTube and Google and Twitter and Facebook and so on. These are all platforms that are very, very sympathetic to the globalist cause and quite punitive against all those that may speak out against globalization. And you see this on social media as soon as a independent commentator that may be anti-globalization begins to get a decent following, suddenly they're deplatformed for reasons that no one can quite explain, some vague terms of service thing and so on. You've got to be a channel like mine that nobody watches and then they don't care. But just looking at the concept of an entire media or series of establishments, and their sole purpose is to push propaganda in aid of the globalist project and to crush and humiliate and shame any of those who may deviate from it. So now, given they're not making money and losing, again, if they were a commercial enterprise, losing vast sums of money, where is the money coming from for the stay in business? Well, it's coming from the very globalist corporations, the big financial corporations. Any big organization that is very much on board with the globalist project and may rely on it primarily or in part for their own viability for another aspect of the business. It may be organizations that want to bring in millions of low-wage Indian workers or something like that. They would own a TV channel or a newspaper or newspaper and TV channel because they want to pump out that propaganda and be able to defend themselves in the mainstream media in the event that their questioned or attacked or something like that. So in effect, the entire mainstream media is there to push propaganda in support of globalisation, attack those who disagree, and of course to justify globalisation and to protect any politician or any person or persons who are in support of globalisation. And part of the globalisation project, of course, is to destabilise Western society, destabilise white society, so that white society no longer has a seat at the table, either as voters or in any other capacity. And then, which is the globalist idea, we don't want to share power with anybody type thing. So the mainstream media is there to shame and humiliate the white population and to divide it with things like they're all racists or white supremacists or they're all Nazis or they're all Hitlers or something like that. This is all invented propaganda nonsense, of course, but it's going at us 24/7 through just about every masthead and every TV channel, cable TV channel or social media. It's full on all the time. Now there are a few channels, mainstream media channels on cable, for example, that aren't part of the globalist cabal, but not very many. And so, what are the other means of funding these things, funding these mainstream, non-viable mainstream media channels? Well, one of them is, particularly on social media, they employ a lot of activist interns, radical little dickheads who just don't know what they're doing, who think that transgender bathrooms are the most important issue that ever existed on planet Earth, and those sorts of people. So they think that anybody that doesn't share their views is Hitler. So they produce. So you get these interns and they write these bullshit columns and articles online and so on to do this. So that these platforms, they've got a very low cost. They're not paying top-notch journalists, far from it. And they're letting these kids get off on the glory and the prestige of, you're sticking it up the white supremacist, you stunning and brave motherfucker. So they're doing that sort of thing and sucking young kids into to write those bullshit columns. So there's low cost of wages, low cost of operation, and so on. So that's one way. The other way that I mentioned was big companies tipping money, or NGOs like George Soros throwing money at it, because again they're behind the globalist project. And in other ways, if a large company gets involved, they could own a news station or a newspaper, and maybe they're very profitable in other areas of the company, so they can sort of do cross arbitrage there on writing off their profits in one side of the business against the losses they made in the media company, and again, pushing for globalization and forcing it through. Also, by ownership of the media, the globalists can really get to any politician. Any politician who's not on board with the globalization project can get withering attacks from all across the media. And you've got to be made of pretty tough stuff to withstand that. You've got to have someone of the confidence and the stature of a Donald Trump or a Ron DeSantis to be able to stand up to those sort of that sort of ridicule and scorn that's orchestrated, scripted, and so on. The other thing too is by buying a media station, the organisation may borrow money from overseas and then do cross-tax arbitrage, add management fees into the loan, which then means that they can write off losses and declare profits elsewhere in a multinational organisation. So there's lots of things like that go on. But the bottom line is the entire mainstream media is not viable. Not so much the social media, like guys like Google do very nicely, thank you. But the mainstream media channels and the cable channels, they're not viable, but they are needed by the globalist project to push the propaganda. So they're accordingly still around and being supported because of the service that they provide to the globalization cause. So that's just a bit of background on that and why those. But in the real world, with competition and so on, then these organisations wouldn't exist. And by the way, the fact they exist in their current form and they're used as propaganda outlets, that's something that the body politic should move against. And in a properly functioning, not the dysfunctioning one we have in the West at the moment, it's completely compromised by the globalists. In a properly functioning democracy where the government is sovereign, then they would move against this sort of thing and it wouldn't be acceptable. But look, even in the case with fully funded, taxpayer-funded mainstream media, the governments are just really flunkies and stooges for the globalists anyway, have lost all sovereignty. So these government stations, they still pump out pro-globalist propaganda and I'm just looking at one just here in Australia yesterday morning, if you go through the main stories of the day, it's men oppressing women, racism, people not complying with COVID rules should go to prison, and so I mean, just one after the other, story after story after story, which is exactly mirrors the globalist position and the globalist talking points list. So there you go. That's a fully taxpayer-funded station. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.